I'm going to be reading, inshallah, from Abu Shuja', the text of Abu Shuja'. So Abu Shuja' is one of the scholars. He has a famous text that he actually didn't name it. So it has many names the scholars gave it. And some people just call it Metin Abi Shuja', the text of Abu Shuja'. Uh, and this is a famous beginner's manual in Shafi'i school. So let's read through it and benefit as much as Allah will for us to benefit, inshallah. The author said, the book of Hajj, he says, there are 7 conditions for the obligation of Hajj. For the obligation, not to make it valid, just to be obligatory on you. Islam, so not if you're a kafir. As a kafir, it is obligatory, but not in a way that he can do it. Rather, it's obligatory on a kafir in a way that makes him responsible in the afterlife, not in a way that he could possibly do it as a kafir. Islam is a condition for it to be valid, so he's able to do its condition and then to do it. So he will be responsible for not doing it. And the same thing for all the other obligations. Puberty, so it's not obligatory on a child, but a child can do it. We mean below puberty. A child can do it if he has mental discerning, like just like a little kid can pray. Once that child reached the age of being able to pray, also this child could make Hajj. But it won't be obligatory. So when that child reaches puberty, he'd have to do a new Hajj if he becomes able. Sanity, so if you're insane, it's not obligatory on you. Freedom, which means not obligatory on a slave. If a slave did it, it's valid, but it's not obligatory. If he became free, he would have to do a new one, just like a child. And having provisions. Having provisions. That means the luggage and the containers and a ride and having a ride. But having a ride is only for someone who's more than 2 days walking from Mecca. If you're able-bodied and you're within 2 days of walking to Mecca, then a ride is not a condition. Just the luggage is a condition. And for the road to be clear, that means safe. Your way to get there is safe in any way, whether like if there was a treacherous sea that you had to cross. Most likely you'll die if you try to take a boat across that, then it's not safe. Here, not the journey, the pathway itself, the way you need to get there. The journey is the trip itself, but we talk about just the actual terrain or whatever it is that you need to cross to get there. So it's close in meaning, but just a slight difference there. Fine difference. And the ability to complete the journey in time. And the ability to complete the journey in time. That means that if you actually started traveling, you can get there on time. So you don't miss Arafah. That's the one you can't miss. Other times are easier to catch. Arafah has tight time. Then he says, the author, may Allah have mercy on him, Hajj has 4 integrals. Ihram with the intention. And ihram is the intention, actually. But the way he said it was al-ihramu ma'aniyah. Ihram with the intention. But the ihram is the intention for the nusuk. So nusuk is Hajj and Umrah. Nusuk means ibadah, worship. But they say nusuk and they mean this. Yani, you say nusuk And because of the context, it would be known that what's meant is Hajj and Umrah in particular. But Nusuk means worship. So the Ihram is the intention for the Nusuk, N-U-S-U-K. Ihram means to make something haram. Like you have an ihram for your prayer. When you say Allahu Akbar, you entered into the state of ihram for your prayer. So what did you make haram? Now you can't turn your chest from the Qibla. You can't talk. You can't eat. You can't play until you complete your prayer. Then when you get out of that ihram for your prayer, then you can play and talk and turn away from the Qibla. When you make the ihram for Hajj, then some things become haram for you, which we're going to talk about. Yes, ihram is it's the intention for Hajj. That's what it is here. It's the intention for Hajj. And then I gave you an example, like you have an ihram for the prayer. When you say Allahu Akbar, you engage in the prayer. You're now in a state of ihram for your prayer. That means something's haram that's not normally haram. So then when you get out of that ihram for your prayer, those things that are haram because of your prayer become permissible. Again, same thing for nusuk. When you make the ihram, then some things will become haram for you until you get out of that ihram. And we'll talk about them inshallah in their place. So the ihram, that's an integral of Hajj. And standing at Arafah or being at Arafah, Arafah is an area. So who's going there will know where to go. So this area called Arafah, you have to be there. At it has certain time. What's its time? Its time is from Dhuhr time before the Eid. The Dhuhr before the Eid. Eid is when? The 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, starting at Dhuhr time and extending all the way till Fajr time. That's the time of Arafah. Dhul Hijjah, the month of Dhul Hijjah. The month of Dhul Hijjah, that's the month for Hajj. So on the ninth of Dhul Hijjah at Dhuhr time, that's when being at Arafah starts. Whether you're standing there or you're sitting there or you took a nap there or you're walking through, you need to be there. Not the whole time, through that time, within that time. Just like you need to perform your prayer inside its time, you need to be at Arafah within its time. Just be present. It's better to be there for part of the day and part of the night. So Dhuhr, it starts at Dhuhr time, then Asr comes in, then Maghrib comes in. When Maghrib comes in, what's that? That's the Eid, because the day starts with the night. So when Maghrib came in, that means the 9th is over. The 10th began, so that's the night of Eid, before the day. Yani, how do we know when Ramadan starts? Isn't it by looking for the crescent? That's because Ramadan starts at nighttime. It's because the night comes before the day. So the sun goes down, Maghrib comes in, now it's the next day, the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. That's Eid. Still time for Arafah. Isha comes in, still time, all the way until Fajr. So if you miss all that, you missed the Arafah. If you missed the Arafah, khalas, you missed your Hajj. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Hajj Arafah. He said, Hajj is Arafah. That means most important part of Hajj. And this is one of the differences between Hajj and Umrah. Umrah does not have Arafah. Yani, Hajj and Umrah are almost identical. They're so close that you can do them simultaneously. But Hajj has some things that Umrah doesn't have. like being at Arafah. That's why you can make Umrah anytime. Hajj, you cannot make it at any time. And also, what's an integral of Hajj? Tawaf, circling the house, the Kaaba, al-Bayt, the house. It has its rules. And a sa'i, striving between the two mountains. So it's like an obstacle course. It's not obstacles, though, how you go from one thing to the next thing, and then to the next thing, and then to the next thing. It's not obstructions, those are worships. It's a worship course. Sa'i means striving, going hard, like walking hard, striding. That's going between the two mountains of As-Safa and Al-Marwa. No, this is Sa'i. Tawaf is circling the Kaaba. Tawaf is circling the Kaaba. Sa'i is striding between the two mountains. 7 laps. Yani one way is a lap. That has its rules. And the author Abu Shuja', he didn't mention shaving, the integral of shaving or trimming. That's going to be, so the ihram, the arafah, the tawaf, the sa'i. So shaving or trimming is going to be the 5th one. We said 4 integrals? Okay, that's what Abu Shuja' said. That's what the author said. But there's others that he didn't mention. So also, what is an integral is shaving or trimming. And also, what's an integral? Keeping the order in most of the integrals. Keeping the order in most of the integrals. So ihram has to come before everything because that's the intention. The ihram is the state that you're in. And the tawaf and the shaving have to be after being at Arafah. Okay? The author says Umrah has 3 integrals: ihram, tawaf, sa'i, and shaving or trimming. Better for the woman to trim, not shave. Better for the man to shave, not trim. Shave means bald. Then the author said Hajj has 3 obligations other than the integrals. So what that means is, in the chapter of Hajj in particular, you have something called wajib. That's not the same as fard. Usually, wajib and fard mean the same, obligatory, except in the Hanafi school. But we're talking about Shafi'i school here. Hmm? Yes. B. Yes. Wajib. Wajib and fard usually mean the same thing in the Shafi'i school, obligatory, but not in the chapter of Hajj. So in the chapter of Hajj, there's an obligation, a wajib, yani wajibs. There are obligations that if you don't do them, you're sinful. That's what makes them wajib. If you don't do them, you're sinful. But they will not invalidate the Hajj. So that's why they're not fard. The integrals we just finished talking about, those are fard. If you don't do them, your Hajj is not valid. You're sinful and your Hajj is not valid. The wajibs, if you don't do them, you're sinful, but your Hajj is still valid. So we call the ones we were just talking about integrals. Yeah, I'm talking about in English. Now we're going to call these obligations in the chapter of Hajj. Obligations that are not integrals. So Abu Shuja' says Hajj has three obligations other than the integrals. One, to make ihram at the specified station. To make ihram at the specified station. Meaning, before crossing a particular station, you should be in a state of ihram. So, ihram has a time and a place. The time of ihram for Hajj is from the Eid until the Eid. Eid of Ramadan, yani the Eid after Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr. Once the sun goes down for the last day of Ramadan, you can make your intention of ihram all the way until you miss Arafah, which is Arafah is on the day of Eid. It starts Dhuhr before Eid and goes into the next night, which is Eid. So you can make your ihram from the Eid until the Eid. So you miss Arafah. But you might not want to do that so early because you're going to put yourself into a state of ihram. And you can't get out of the state of ihram just by deciding that. That's different from the prayer. If you started your prayer, you got into a state of ihram. But if you just said, all right, I'm not praying anymore right now, I'm going to go back to work, and you broke your prayer. So what happened? That's haram, an obligatory prayer. That's haram, major sin. But you're not in the state of ihram for your prayer anymore. You broke your prayer. You interrupted it. Hajj, the ihram for nusuk is not like that. When you get into the state of ihram for nusuk, you will not get out regardless of your intention, regardless of your actions, unless you do what unties that knot. Hajj, when you make the ihram for Hajj, it's like you tied two knots. You won't get out until you do what unties those two knots. Two, tahallul. The tahallul is what's going to get you back and make you halal again. Literally, if you're not in a state of ihram, you're halal. You're halal. If you're in a state of ihram, you're haram. You can say it like that. You can say he's haram. That means he's in a state of ihram. I'm halal because I'm not in a state of ihram. When it comes to the Hajj, you can't just get out of ihram. Like, let's say you made your intention of ihram, and then in the middle of your Hajj, you said, "Oh, I'm going home. I'm not going to finish." So what happened? You're still in the state of ihram. You'll stay in the state of ihram for the rest of your life if you don't do the tahallul that gets you out of the state of ihram for the nusuk. It's not like just breaking your prayer. So that's why it's important for a person who wants to make Hajj or Umrah to learn so that he doesn't get himself in the state of ihram and not get out of it and think he did. Because when you're haram, you can't get married, you can't have sexual intercourse with your wife, you can't clip your nails, you can't grease your hair, and that might not be too much for a day or 2 or 3 days, but you go like that for what? The rest of your life, you're going to have an inconvenience. Until Eid, from Eid to Eid. Eid al-Fitr until Eid al-Adha. The date, not the whole Eid al-Adha, up until Fajr, when Arafah is over. That's the time of ihram for Hajj, not for Umrah, because Umrah can be done anytime. So there's a time for ihram and there's a place for it also. It's called miqat. Miqat. The specified station, that depends on which direction you're coming from. Because you might be coming from north or east or south or west. You might be coming from like Egypt or Morocco, or you might be coming from Iraq, or you might be coming from Syria, or you might be coming from Yemen. So there's known stations for the pilgrims that not to cross them without being in a state of ihram. So you can make your ihram as early as the Eid after Ramadan if you want to bear with that. And then you have to get into the state of ihram before you cross the miqat, depending on which direction you come from. So those are known. I'm just not naming them now so we can just have this general overview from what Abu Shuja gave. Hajj is a big chapter, as you can probably surmise. Miqat, Miqat. Underline the I and the A. Miqat. So, what if somebody crossed the miqat without being in a state of ihram? That's haram. If he made his ihram after that, it's still valid, but he committed a sin. And what he should do is go back and make his ihram and then cross. So you go over Hajj another time, you'll fill in all those details and names and stuff. I think this is one of the reasons why people maybe don't understand Hajj when they learn it first. Too much information at once. And also throwing the stones at the three stations. Throwing the stones at the three stations. So that has its rules. Stones. So not uh, shoes or trash. That's how ignorant Muslims are today about their religion. They throw trash in there. They throw all sorts of things in there. A diamond is a stone, so that would be valid. Not a pearl, though. Throwing stones at the three stations. Those stations are known. So, and those are done for 3 days. So you have, when you're doing Hajj, uh, the Eid day and 3 days after that, right? So, yani, even for us when we're not in Hajj, there's Eid and then there's 3 more days. So those 3 days, those are called the days of Tashriq. On those 3 days, people will be throwing the stones at the three stations, going from one station to the other station, and whatever else is for those 3 days. Those stations have times also. Yeah, it has a time, which I'm just trying to keep everything brief now. And also, here, the wajibs of Hajj. Now, Abu Shuja, let me clarify. Listen, Abu Shuja, uh, his book is a summary. So some things are missing, actually. Some cases are missing in his book. And also, sometimes there's some difference in opinion about some details inside the Shafi'i school itself. So Abu Shuja has just a little bit of some things a little bit rearranged, not exactly like we learned from the route of the Sheikh. However, his layout is very nice. So I would have just read for you from the Mukhtasar, but I think Abu Shuja, his presentation of Hajj, it helps to give you a good idea. Um, so we already said shaving and trimming is an integral. Abu Shuja didn't count it as an integral. Rather, he counted it as a wajib here. A wajib, something is obligatory that's not an integral. So what's correct is that shaving or trimming is an integral. Yes. As for the wajibs, they are making ihram from the miqat, as we just said, and throwing at the three stations, and also staying the night at Muzdalifah on the night of the Eid, and staying the night at Mina on the days of Tashriq. Tashriq. Yeah, Tashriq with a Q at the end. Now let's mention one more thing and then we'll stop, insha'Allah ta'ala. So what's haram by the ihram? 10 things become haram. One, wearing stitched clothing. That's for a man. Wearing stitched clothing, like the clothes we wear now, normally. Aren't your sleeves sewn to the shirt, etc., unless you have a vest on? So wearing stitched clothing for a man. This one's for a man. The woman can wear stitched clothing when she's haram. The man cannot. And for the man to cover his head, so he can't put a kufi on or a cap or a turban, or even if he got out of the shower and he wanted to dry his head with a towel, that's covering his head. That's haram. Imagine if you had to stay like that for the rest of your life. You didn't get out the state of ihram. You can't wear stitched clothing. We'll go to work wearing something. Uh, and for the woman to cover her face and hands. For the woman to cover her face and hands. That's a proof right there that the woman is not obligated to cover her face. If she was obligated to cover her face, she wouldn't be obligated to uncover it when doing the worship. And greasing the hair and shaving the hair or even removing the hair in any way until the time of shaving comes. Pulling the hair, trimming, all that will be haram. Clipping the nails, perfume. The only difference for men and women here is wearing stitched clothing and covering the head. The man cannot wear stitched clothing or cover his head. The woman can wear stitched clothing and cover her head, but she can't cover her face and her hands. And greasing the hair, shaving it before the time comes in, clipping the nails, perfume, that includes anything scented, anything you seek for its smell. So your deodorant, soap, shampoo. So you'd have to use scentless everything. If you didn't get out of the state of ihram, if you're going to use that, or you can just rock out. Killing game, yani hunting, edible land animals, hunting edible land animals. We're not talking about domesticated animals. That's not hunting. If you got cows, that's not hunting. And we're not talking about fishing. So birds and edible land animals. The marriage contract, so you cannot get married in the state of ihram. And you can't have anything to do with any a marriage in any way, at any capacity. You can't be a witness or a guardian or get married or anything. You can't give your daughter in marriage. And sexual intercourse, if you're already married, you have to refrain from that. as long as you're in a state of ihram, and physical contact with desire, like foreplay. That's haram. Not just a kiss of support, for example. Now, we're not even close to finish the chapter of Hajj. Maybe we covered of a bare overview 30 to 40%. But there is one thing I want to tell you before we go, which is how do you get out of the state of ihram? Let me review that here. Okay. Know that Hajj has two stages for permitting the prohibitions of ihram. Two tahalluls. The first is called the first tahallul, and the second is called the second tahallul. So there's three things to completely get out of ihram. You have to do three things to do both tahalluls. If you do two out of three, you did the first tahallul. If you do all three, then you did both tahalluls. So one is making tawaf, and that the sa'i goes with it. Sa'i follows the tawaf. So tawaf and sa'i. But the sa'i follows the tawaf. Throwing at the Aqaba station, there's three stations you throw at. Throwing at one of them in particular, Jamratul Aqaba, and shaving or trimming. Those three. So if you do two of those three, you did the first tahallul. If you do all three, then you've done both tahalluls. What happens if you do the first tahallul? Then everything that was haram becomes permissible except the matters pertaining to women, meaning marriage and foreplay. So if you do all three, then even the matters pertaining to women become permissible. A lot of books don't mention the tahallul. Wait, any other question? Let's stop there, inshallah ta'ala.